Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here. So the Murder at Castle Nathria expansion and new arena meta have been ongoing, and it is, we'll just call it a very crazy meta. I'll try to keep this video objective and not complain about the problems with it too much, because I don't want to spend too much time on that, because I do have faith that Matt London and the modes team are going to fix a lot of the issues, just a matter of, how quickly. Because for a bit of a quick meta overview here, it's an extremely high variance, high roll, low roll meta. We came from a pretty high variance meta too, caused largely by the colossals, but the difference now is that instead of the big super powerful cards being all legendaries like colossals, now a lot of them are like rare and epic cards, so they're just way more common. And they also are like 2 and 3 mana cards like the locations, wild seeds, these kind of things, so they really are kind of dominating the meta. And on top of that, there's a lot of terrible cards in the draft, just from like, especially One Night and Karazhan expansion, that cause also really negative variants that are also making... So potentially you can have decks completely carried by really good cards. You can also have decks completely ruined by just getting forced to pick really bad cards as well. So the reason I feel like that's important to mention for this tier list, we're going to rate all the classes, is that even though we have like places where we can put the classes, it's worth noting that especially if you have a low sample size of runs, like it's going to be natural to say like, oh, but this class seems really strong because I drafted 2 really good decks, but it's like, it's just variance basically. If you just hit the cards, then any deck can be, from any class, can be super overpowered, and any class can also pretty much be absolute garbage. But some classes are, again, usually better than others, so that's why we're making this list here. And with that, let's get into the list, and as I go through each of the classes individually, I'll kind of try to talk about some of those big power cards that are defining the class, and also I'll try to talk about just like, if you don't hit those cards, how much weaker the class is, relatively speaking. So let's start at the top here. The first class we have right now is, of course, Hunter. Hunter is, in my opinion, by far the most consistent class, and it's not even necessarily that they have that much better cards. It's just the fact that if Hunter, even if you get a bad Hunter deck, you're still a Hunter, and you can still win just by being a Hunter. Of course, as I mentioned previously, they do have the Wild Seeds, which have pretty much every Wild Seed card. If you high roll it, you hit like the 3-drop, you have the opportunity to automatically win on the spot, particularly Wild Spirits, which I'm expecting that card actually gets nerfed in Constructed, because even in Constructed that card is broken. I think that one will be nerfed, but just in general, any Wild Seed card, you should pick it over anything, pretty much. And also, the reason Hunter's so good is all 10 of their cards from the new expansion are just really good. So Collateral Damage, of course, being one of the other key cards that's just, I mean, it just does way too much. It's just absurd, right? And because if you're not aware, there is a new set offering bonus. Matt London actually confirmed this on Twitter a few days ago. So all of those cards that are all really good from the new set are also showing up in draft more often than other cards. So that's a huge part of the reason also why Hunter is so good right now. But that is it for Hunter. And with that, that is also it for the Amazing tier. That is the only class I'm going to be putting in the top tier. Let's move on to the Great tier now. We have only in one class yet again. Did I mention that this is not a very balanced meta? I should have probably mentioned that as well earlier. We have Mage here. So Mage has a couple key cards, which are also some of the newest cards from the new set. And basically all of the top cards in Mage are the skeleton cards. Not exactly the skeleton itself, but Cold Case, the 4-mana spell which gives you skeletons, is very good. Even better than that is Deathborn, which is basically Cycle of Hatred but skeleton mode. Anyone that's playing Arena for a long time knows how good Cycle of Hatred is. And also the big one is the Location. The Location, to me, I think is the just most broken card, and also just really unfun because it kind of removes your opponent's ability to play the game. And it is performing like basically one of the best cards in the entire game. That card is called Nightcloak Sanctum. If you have Nightcloak Sanctum, by the way, Mage is absolutely S tier and might even be better than Hunter, but if you don't have Nightcloak Sanctum, you're probably not even the Great tier. You're probably only C, like B or C tier, however you want to call this. So yeah, overall, Mage is the second most consistently good class. Even if you miss it, you still have somewhat of a chance, but you're gonna get farmed by Hunters basically. And with that, that is it for the Great tier. And then we move on to the Decent tier. There are only going to be 2 classes in the Decent tier, and the first one I'm going to talk about is Priest. So Priest again has a big location card that is kind of defining the class, and you're at a big disadvantage if you don't take it. It's not quite as overpowered as Nightcloak Sanctum and Mage, but it is still very good. It's basically everything that Priest ever has always been lacking and wanted. It's 3 card draws and also gives buffs that are able to give attack Because Priest has all these buff cards that are great at giving health, but then if you buff, you know, a 3 attack minion, just give it a bunch of health, it's not really that good, you know? But then this suddenly lets you buff attack as well, which just, you know, it's just combined with other Priest cards, it just does everything, gives your deck so much consistency. It's just very, very good. So if you have that card, you know, Priest will move up to maybe even the amazing tier, at least the great tier, but you just don't always get it is the issue. And Priest has still a lot of problems. They have a whole lot of board clears now at least, but again, like if you don't hit the location, you might just get outvalued, especially by mages. You might even get outvalued by hunters. Overall, Priest on average is just in kind of the decent tier. Next, we'll move on to the other class in the decent tier, which is Paladin. So Paladin has two big new cards that are also defining its class. One is Buffet Biggin, or Big Gun, I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it, but that is the 4-drop that if you infuse it for 3, you get basically, instead of 1/1s, you get Scarlet Crusaders, which is just an absolutely absurd amount of stats. And the key thing in this meta is that there just aren't a lot of ways to do like a lot of pings efficiently. So this is a tempo swing that it actually will just end the game on the spot a lot of the time. And that's usually because, you know, a lot of the old neutral ways to have pings, like Ram Commander or Bunker Sergeant, for example, these cards just don't exist anymore. So really, again, like you just can't deal with that. And also, they also have a very, very good location. Their location is 2 mana for 3 charges of turn a minion to a 3/3. You can actually, obviously, this can be used very well defensively to, you know, suppress threats, but also you can use this aggressively. And I've been killed by paladins that just, you know, put this on dudes 3 times, and it's a lot of tempo if you just use it aggressively as well. And often against Hunter, for example, that's going to be the better way to do it because you don't expect the Hunter to have huge things anyway. But the issue with Paladin is, again, like if you don't hit a couple of these key cards, and Paladin always has, you know, very strong cards that you just don't always see. If you don't hit the strong cards, Paladin is nearly unplayable. So Paladin is probably the highest variance on this list. Honestly, just whether or not you get a good deck, it could be amazing, it could be absolutely terrible, but on average it's just about decent. And with that, we're going to move on to tier 4 here, which is, now that we're in the bottom half of the tier list, this is where most of the classes are sitting. So the first class we're going to talk about here is Demon Hunter. So Demon Hunter is interesting because I do think it has a lot of very good cards right now. They even had some cards like Dreadlord's Bite, for example, that were previously nerfed and were unnerfed when they went back to Wild. So now Dreadlord's Bite is a 3/2 weapon, which makes it absolutely crazy powerful. They have, like, you know, Cycled Hatred, Expendable Performers both came back. Demon Hunter has a lot of really good cards, it's just that you just don't always get them. But generally speaking, you know, having a Demon Hunter hero power is pretty good, so you can make things work with Demon Hunter. However, having said that, the issue with Demon Hunter is that you're just going to have less good cards, whether it's tempo cards to compete with Hunter or value cards to compete with Mage. You're just going to be kind of a worse version of either of those two classes, right? So, and about half the time in this meta, you're against either a Hunter or a Mage, and then you're just unfortunately going to be at a disadvantage. And you're also probably going to have a really tough time dealing with any decent Priest too. So just a little bit difficult for Demon Hunter, but Demon Hunter, you know, out of the top tier classes would be the one that I would prefer to play, I think. The other issue with Demon Hunter is that their new set is really, really bad. So unfortunately, a lot of new cards are going to be kind of littering your draft and just, you know, lowering the consistency that you actually get the older cards, which are actually better. And what's going to force you to just take like bad neutral cards as well more often. But that is Demon Hunter. So let's move on to the next class here, which we will put here. That is Shaman. So Shaman does have a good location card. It's Muck Pools. It's just, compared to a lot of the other ones, it's not nearly as high impact as, you know, Mage, Priest, Paladin, but it is very good. And they have a decent new set as well. A lot of the cards are kind of weird totem cards, which probably aren't exactly working, but the weapon is very good at least. So again, like, Shaman is playable, but it's certainly not at the consistency of classes that are higher than it on the list. You can make things work, but again, you're just going to have a disadvantage against any of the better classes because their cards are just going to be better than yours. It's definitely possible to get a very high roll Shaman deck. And I think it's also very possible to get a high roll Druid deck, which is the next class we're going to talk about here. I had drafted one Druid and kind of went for like a whole meme beast synergy deck, which actually kind of worked. I think I got to like 8 wins on it. I might put that one on YouTube, but yeah. Druid in the same sense, they had like an okay new set. Plot of Sin is one of the big cards from the new set. Plot of Sin, if you infuse it for 5, which is hard to do, but you will do eventually, then you get 3 mana for 2 5/5s, which is absolutely obscene. That card's super overperforming for kind of obvious reasons. Because you like to flood the board as Druid anyway, so it just makes a lot of sense. And you have Arbor up back as well, so there's some good Druid cards. It's just the issue is that you just don't always see them. So Druid is going to be, I think, a bit hit or miss just based off of that. And you have spell discovers to try to find, Plot of Sin, but a discovered Plot of Sin is going to be infused. It's just going to be a little bit late, but, it can still be very, very good. Worth mentioning as well that along with Hunter, they have access to Resizing Pouch, which can get you banned cards like the banned 9-drop and stuff. It's very, very good things. But overall, again, on average, you're just going to be at a disadvantage versus any of the other good classes that hit their things. With that, let's talk about the last class in this tier, which is Warlock. So Warlock has a lot of good cards. They do have a lot of imp-based cards. You're obviously not going to get to go full imp Warlock like you could in Constructed. So the location, for example, could be hit or miss, but a lot of their top performing cards do happen to be imps. Imp Gang Boss is still great. You can get Ring Matron. You have Demonic Studies to potentially find them. Mischievous Imp is one of the top cards, period, in the set. It's performing absurdly well. But again, it's just one of those things where Warlock's been spoiled with very good cards lately because they had like the standard set as the rotation generally, but they just lost a whole lot of those cards. They still have like Abyssal Enforcer and stuff as well, but they're just not as consistent as they used to be. You're still a Warlock, you still have Life Tap. The issue is that Life Tap, it just makes you even weaker to dying to Hunter, right? And even Mage has a lot of burst. There's a lot of burst in the game, so that just makes Warlock a bit vulnerable in general. But it is still possible to win these matches with Warlock if you just get really, really good tempo. It's definitely just not consistent to go for the value strategy with Warlock though, unless you get like some of the broken legendaries like Castle Nathria, for example. That would be a pretty good enabler, but otherwise, you're going to have a hard time. And with that, let's move on to the last 2 classes on this list. The first one we'll put down here is Rogue. So Rogue had a very weak new set. They got a bunch of these weird like secret stuff, and secrets in Arena typically aren't very good. I will say the Rogue secrets are pretty good, but it's not a great strategy. Like it's not going to impede a Hunter by very much, or a Mage is just going to get to do their things too. Any of the other classes, like you're just going to have a tough time if you're going for that. You don't really want to go down that route with Rogue. You'd much rather just kind of go for tempo, and you can get a good tempo Rogue, but it's just, there's other classes. You're just not going to be as good basically as like a Druid, a Demon Hunter, or a Hunter at actually fighting for board most of the time, unless you high roll, which you can. And there's still ways to discover things from other classes to get things that are better than anything that Rogue can do basically, but it's a tough meta for Rogue. Do not recommend playing it. As well as the last class on this list we have here, which is Warrior. So Warrior, again, they lost a lot of really good cards. They did get some good cards back, but one thing is that Warrior's always at a disadvantage in Arena if they don't buff up the offering rate of a lot of their good cards, and that's kind of the situation they're in now, where they have a lot of good cards, but they just, because you don't have a hero power basically, there's not even all those armor synergy stuff anymore. So now Warrior hero power is back to being completely useless against anything besides Hunter basically. And you have some good things. You have Sword Eater, Dragon Roar, Athletic Studies, some other good tempo cards, but again, you're still just not as good at tempo as a lot of the other classes right now, so you're just always going to be at a disadvantage for the most part. But that is it for this list. I'm hoping that this won't be valid for too long. I don't know when Blizzard might do a patch to bring down like Hunter and Mage, hopefully, and maybe help out some of the other classes, but hopefully this week. Maybe it won't be until next week though. We're gonna have to see, because I do think Blizzard's gonna need to make some pretty heavy-handed changes to make this meta feel a bit better. They've been showing willingness to do that, so I have faith that they will do that, hopefully sooner rather than later. That's it. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, and check us out on Twitch, twitch.tv/kolst, if you want to see some of our runs live. Thanks a lot again for hanging out, everyone. We'll see you guys in the next one.